Hello, and welcome to today's Bible study. You probably can't hear, but my dog is panting very loudly next to me, and it's a little bit distracting, but I'm gonna try to power through it. Okay, so, wow, it's really hard to think with you just panting there next to me like that. You know that? Yeah. Deep breaths, that's what we're doing. So if you're watching on YouTube, I usually like to start with a quiet worship song. Go away. I like to start with a quiet worship song. But before we do the quiet worship song, I also like to do a deep breathing exercise. So if you wouldn't mind doing 3 just basic deep breaths with me right now. Orbits can join. So we go in, out. Alright, so like I said, I'd like to do a song after we do the deep breathing, but I can't play the song here because, copyright reasons. So if you wouldn't mind going to the description, and you should just see a link for a quiet worship song. And if you just want to pause this video, go watch that video, keep breathing, meditate on the lyrics, maybe sway a little, do whatever you need to do to get you into that learning meditative mindset. So do that, and then when you are done, come back to this video. Alright, does that sound like a plan? Cool, so you can pause the video right now. And you're back. Fantastic. I'm so happy for you to be back. I hope you enjoyed the song. So, getting into the study now. It's Genesis chapter 12. I don't really have anything to really introduce this. It's pretty straightforward, so let's just jump in. New Revised Standard Version of Genesis 12 starts. The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country." I'm sucking on a cough drop, sorry. The Lord said to Abram, "Go from your country, your people, and your father's household to the land I will show you. I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you, I will curse. And all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." So, this is the second covenant God makes with people, after the flood one. This one is obviously foreshadowing the Messiah, and, all the future covenants will essentially be the same, I'm gonna take care of you, and there's probably gonna be a Messiah later, if I'm not mistaken. I'm pretty sure that's accurate, but this one specifically, all the peoples on the earth will be blessed through you. I think that's pretty obvious talking about the Messiah. Though it is interesting how if you don't know about Jesus, you'd assume it means that all Abram's descendants are going to bring peace to the earth. Not just that one person. And that assumption isn't wrong if you think back to the Bible Project, their video on covenants, which I will link in the sources for those who forgot. Basically, God left it open for humans to be the Messiah if they so wanted to, just in case he could save himself the trouble. But humans couldn't fulfill that role, so he had to do it himself. And he kind of knew that that's how it was going to go. I think it's actually kind of sweet that God knew humans couldn't live up to the goal for paradise, but he left the door open for us to try anyways. He's really trying to involve us in this. Like, it makes me, excuse me, it kind of makes me think of, parents that let their, like, little kids, like toddlers, like, help with baking, even though they just mostly get in the way and make a huge mess, and it's really just the parents doing it, and the toddler's just kind of watching. It's just an endearing thought, in my opinion. I'd also like to quickly point out that the last chapter was about man's failed plans. You know, with the Tower of Babel, they had plans for, like, being this great unified people, and it failed. And then in this chapter, you see God's plans for, like, more success. Just, you know, some more Hebrew literary devices for you. And also, even besides the Messiah, God kept his promise about Abram's name being great. One of the few things that Jews, Muslims, and Christians can all agree on is that Abraham is very important to their faith. And God continues to bless the Jewish people today, who are one of the few ancient civilizations still around. Like, there's not a lot of, like, civilizations mentioned in the Bible that still exist currently. Like, I think I can think of, like, the Egyptians and, like, Romans. Technically, they're Italians now, though, so I don't know. I feel like that only technically counts. But, you know, and he also was talking about how he'll curse those who curse him. And, you know, if you're thinking through history, basically all of the quote-unquote empires that tried to, you know, exterminate the Jews, they're basically nothing people now. So, you know, that's just examples of God keeping his promise. So, next verse. So, Abram went as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he set out from Haran. Okay, so I just want to point out that I discovered that in Acts 7, we found out that God had in fact told Abram to leave for Canaan before he even got to Haran. So there actually was partial obedience, as Enduring Word said in the last chapter. I kind of went on a rant about, like, I don't see that in the text at all. Why are you just assuming that was partial obedience? So sorry about that. That's the joys of reading as you go and then teaching it as you go. You know, we're in this together. We also find out in Acts that Abram didn't leave until his dad died. However, as I noted last week, the numbers for this don't add up. Abram's dad, Terah, he had Abram by the time he was 70, according to the text, and then died when he was 205. Even assuming that Abram had just been born when Terah turned 70, that would still mean Abram would have left Haran when Terah was 145, not 205. So before we accuse the text of being inconsistent, let's consider that there's still two possible explanations for this. One is my own theory that I thought of. I don't know if I actually believe it, but I thought, hey, this is a possibility. And that is that maybe Terah was spiritually dead, you know, by 145. You know, as noted in other books, Terah is said to be an idol worshiper. Maybe he was one of those, like, lukewarm believers that became more and more distant to God over time. And by the time he was 145, like, he was just completely a lost cause. And Abram saw that, so when God told him to leave, it was like an easy decision for him, assuming religious affiliations was like a regular argument between these two, as it often tends to be. Maybe, as they were all trying to go to Canaan together, like, on the way, Terah lost his faith completely, and instead he just wanted to stay in Haran forever. So there's that. The other theory is maybe more plausible because actual scholars came up with it. Granted, I'm not totally sure how reliable these are because I'm not as familiar with the website I'm referencing, which is BioLogos. Naked Bible Podcast talked about BioLogos. See, Heiser says logos for his work, but this is a different company, Biologos. I don't know. Either way, in episode like 356, there was like an interview, and they were like talking about this guy that used to work for them, and like the reviews were like kind of mixed. Basically, there was just like some disagreement about the historicity and science of Adam and Eve. But the people there, they seem to be on friendly terms with them, last I heard. And either way, you might need to take this theory with like a little bit of grain of salt. But I do recall in the Naked Bible podcast, like, talking about this theory before, so I don't think it's just them that thinks this. I think there's other scholars, so it's probably fine. I'm not sure. It was kind of a headache to research, so just want to like put that out there. But basically, the view, and I actually mentioned this last time, is that the ages are not literal ages, but metaphorical. It's like just some made up ancient Hebrew numerology type thing, that was like meant to like symbolize something. Like the ages weren't actually ages. It was like a hey, this is number symbolizing this. Excuse me. As far as I can tell, nobody really knows for sure what that something is, which kind of makes it harder to like pinpoint that. But the Biologos article points out that the majority of the ages end in either 0, 2, 5, 7, or 9. So there's, out of the 10 numbers that it could end in, it only ends in like 5 of them, which is weird. It's definitely like a pattern, and patterns are suspicious. We should be suspicious of that. And it's usually just a sign that, these ages might be more than just a number. But the whole theory, I think, is just very complicated and vague, and I don't especially feel like trying to tease that one out. So I'm going to be linking the Biologos article, as I would have done anyways. But if you want to know more, there you go. And if it makes sense to you, feel free explaining it to me, but explain it like I'm 5, because I couldn't even get through the article without being like, this is too much. But to end this part on a nice note, also notice that Abram's partial obedience didn't reduce God's promise. God just delayed it until Abram was ready. Though part of me wonders if Sarai having Isaac when they were 100 was meant to be payback for making God wait. This is more of a silly thought I had, though, but maybe mostly it's just nice to know even Abram wasn't a perfectly faithful person. He grew in faith like the rest of us. So, next verse. He took his wife Sarai, Abram, his nephew Lot, all the possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran. And they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. By the way, Enduring Word tries to make the case that Lot coming with them, even though God basically said, leave your family, is more partial obedience that will end up biting Abram in the butt later. Personally, I think this is just a little bit unfair. Does Abram have to get Lot out of trouble a lot? Yes, he does. Does Abram end up having to split from Lot eventually because his side of the family is being annoying? Yes. Do Lot's ancestors eventually become like major pests to Israel? Also, yes. But let's not forget he was also the prophet in Sodom and considered to be the only good person in the whole area worth saving. So, that's got to count for something. I personally think Lot isn't himself a bad person. He's just bad luck. That's all. Just one of those people where like trouble always follows them. Anyways, next verse. Abram traveled through the land as far as the site of the great tree of Maura at Shechem. Yeah, I've heard this said so many times, and I was so confident in being able to say it, and I just got tripped up last second. Shechem. That's what it was. Shechem. At that time, the Canaanites were in the land. The Lord appeared to Abram and said, "To your offspring I will give this land." So he built an altar there to the Lord who had appeared to him. Shechem, by the way, is in Canaan / Israel. For those who don't know, this area is going to pop up more later when Joshua is buried there and Jacob builds a dynasty. And even when Jesus meets the Samaritan woman at the well. Though it was called Sychar by then. But if you're familiar with those passages, you get the vibe that this is a place for commitments and turning points. And it all started with God telling Abram that this land was for his descendants. Anyways, next verse. From there, he went on toward the hills east of Bethel and pitched his tent, with Bethel on the west and Ai on the east. Those places are also in Israel / Canaan, just so we're clear. Another note here, it's interesting, Abram pitched a tent. Instead of building a house when God said this land was his. I'm pretty sure houses were a thing by now, but probably, most likely, this is just what Abram was used to by then. It was all that he could afford. They were technically still on hostile land, and, God's always trying to move them around places, so they probably needed to stay flexible with their location. It's a little bit like, why a tent? But they're just pilgrims and nomads, so it's probably not that weird. Enduring Word makes the case that we are often trying to create these big mansions or just like other type of dream homes. I know I am. Just like trying to make Earth our permanent residence, but heaven is our true permanent residence. So we should be more like pilgrims, going wherever God commands. I don't know if this analogy totally fits here specifically, since, God, again, told Abram Canaan was his land. So I would think pitching a tent would possibly note disbelief of this claim on Abram's part. But, again, it was probably more of like a practical thing than like a disbelief thing. So, and, Enduring Word isn't wrong for saying it generally. Like, yeah, you're right. We should be focusing more on like heavenly things than material things. So I thought I'd include it anyways, even though I'm like a little bit suspicious of it, but I will allow it. So, okay, next verse. This cough drop is not working. There, he built an altar to the Lord and called on the name of the Lord. Then Abram set out and continued toward Negev. Negev is still in Canaan. I assume most people don't know all the major ancient Israeli cities. I didn't. So I just wanted to make sure we're clear that Abram has not left the problem land yet. But this part confused me a little because I thought the part about Abram calling on God was like he was trying to get God's attention and help for something, and God just like didn't acknowledge it at all. But I guess it just means it was a place of worship for God. So just, just in case I confused anybody else, he was just worshiping God. But yeah, so Abram has not left the promised land yet, which brings us to the next verse. Now there was a famine in the land, and Abram went down to Egypt, there to live for a while because the famine was severe. Oh yeah, I gotta sneeze. I'm okay. I was working today and it was real dusty, and I think I'm allergic to dirt now. Anyways, Enduring Word says Abram should have... You know what? He's actually made my hair look so... Oh, look at that. Oh, I love it. Anyways, Abram... Enduring Word says Abram should have stayed in Canaan and trusted God to provide. Maybe Abram's faith wasn't strong enough, or he simply didn't know he could ask God for mundane things like food. You know, it's not like there was like a text or any record that God had done that before, so maybe he just didn't know. It should be noted, however, God never explicitly said not to go to Egypt, at least not in the text. So it's hard to say for sure if this was the right move, but we'll get more into that later. So the next verse is, as he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, I know what a beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see you, they will say, this is his wife. Then they will kill me, but they will let you live. Say you are my sister, so that I will be treated well, for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you. I'd like to point out that Sarai actually was Abram's half-sister. You know, incest was still allowed back then, so this isn't completely wrong, but he did intentionally hide the part of the truth that mattered, so as to deceive. So this is still pretty wrong. Like, he knows what he's doing. Even if it was to save oneself, it's still a slippery slope to go down. Anyways, next verse. Yeah, my body's just not keep making those weird noises. Anyways, when Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that Sarai was a very beautiful woman, and when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into the palace. He treated Abram well for her sake, and Abram acquired sheep and cattle, male and female donkeys, male and female servants, and camels. Non-binary camels, I think. Enduring Word says God rewarded Abram for his lies, but I'm not sure where they get that idea. It's very clearly Pharaoh giving out the gifts. God has nothing to do with this. As we'll see, or you may already know, it was actually God who ended the scam. So I just want to take this opportunity to point out that not all good things come from God, and, you know, good quote unquote. Good things come from evil sometimes. They're not, it kind of makes them like dirty good things, you know? Like, why else would people do evil things? You know, it's to cheat and get more than they deserve. And sometimes people get away with it in this life. You know, that doesn't mean God condones it or they won't pay for it in the next life. I just want to clarify that. And, you know, usually with true Christians, you do end up reaping what you sow in this life. If you're a true Christian, usually God's going to convict you on that at some point. But just want to point that out. You know, sometimes bad people get good things. So, anyways, last verse. But the Lord inflicted serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife Sarai. So Pharaoh summoned Abram. What have you done to me? He said. Why didn't you tell me she was your wife? Why did you say, she is my sister, so that I took her to be my wife? And now then, here is your wife. Take her and go. Then Pharaoh gave orders about Abram to his men, and they sent him on his way with his wife and everything he had. So he got to keep his stuff, so that was nice of Pharaoh to let him have that. Probably didn't want to get further cursed by God. But okay, so we're ending on a rant this week. There's a lot of things to unpack here. So like I said, Enduring Word makes the claim that Abram should have stayed in Canaan, but I don't think that's especially clear from the text. So that's going to be like a maybe from me, dog. But they then take it further and say Egypt, though it looked like a safe haven, was actually evil. You know, they try to make that like, oh, it looks good, but it's actually bad. Like it was some kind of spiritual trap. I personally think this is unfair. Abram was the one making bad choices the entire time. He was the one that lied and basically pimped out his wife. Egypt only ever gave them nice things, Maybe if they knew that Sarai was actually his wife, maybe they would have been mean. And you could also maybe make the argument that Sarai was probably not Pharaoh's first love, and he probably had a whole harem, and he was just adding Sarai to the collection, which is also sus. And probably that's what happened. But, it's not mentioned in the text. The focus is clearly on Abram's, we're focusing on what actually happened. And what actually happened was Abram doing not good things. Egypt is not by itself evil or in the wrong. Not yet, anyways. Not in this passage. But Abram used it for evil. They also got Hagar, their future surrogate mother, technically, from Egypt, which Enduring Word tries to use as further proof that, Egypt bad. But again, Hagar didn't seduce Abram. Sarai pushed Hagar on Abram. It might have been a little rapey too. We don't know. These are just people that make poor life choices. Don't blame a whole other race of people for that. Enduring Word goes on to state Abram should have logically concluded God would have kept him safe in Egypt because God promised him children and they didn't have any yet. And this might be true for this specific situation, maybe. I kind of find this to be borderline dangerous reasoning. For one, we're basing this off of a covenant promise, which, if you remember the Bible Project's covenant video, they tend to be two-way streets. God promised to bless Abram if he went to Canaan, and he wasn't in Canaan at this time, so there's still a chance God could have been well, you broke your end, so I can break mine. But to be fair, there's nothing in the text that says Abram wasn't supposed to visit Egypt to write out a bad famine. In fact, maybe God did want Abram to go to Egypt as a test of faith. Maybe it was to see if he'd trust God to protect him or not. Maybe the Egyptians would have left Abram alone. And we'll just never know for sure because Abram lied. But the more blatantly dangerous thing about thinking that you're invincible until God fulfills some promise to you is that people could look at that and think God promised them something, or maybe they just don't fully acknowledge what they're meant to do on their end, so they just start recklessly testing God, not because they doubt, but because they think they can get away with it. And that might seem admirable to many, but it's not exactly biblical. Testing God has always been just for the doubters, either for individuals or those surrounding an individual. It's not for people who already believe and already trust God. Jesus, the one who arguably believed the most, in himself, he never showed off his God-given powers or tested them unnecessarily. In fact, Satan was the one who was trying to get him to do the showing off, just that in the wilderness. And Jesus refused because he didn't have to prove anything to anyone whose beliefs were already cemented. Let's also not forget how God promised to protect Israel from their enemies. But when Israel, stopped being faithful and started being reckless, he turned them over to their enemies. God will absolutely break his promises with you if you don't hold up your end. Well, maybe breaking promises isn't the right phrase. He will cut you out of the benefits, at least temporarily, maybe permanently, depends on the situation. maybe try someone else or something. But either way, don't think that God's promises make you invincible until they're fulfilled. Consider what you have to do in order to, you got to meet God halfway with these things. None of this like Jesus take the wheel kind of nonsense. You should only show off or act recklessly when given permission by God to do so, or you feel the need for some kind of confirmation. Like I said, it's usually like this kind of behavior is only for doubters, so it's just like a way to put your doubts at ease. So, to be fair to Enduring Word, I think that this kind of logic would apply to direct obstacles like a famine or telling strangers who your wife is. Abram should have trusted God to keep him safe, either in Canaan or Egypt, whichever it was supposed to be. I just don't want other people misunderstanding that as permission to be unnecessarily reckless or to test God when you don't need to. Don't try people, especially God. But to go right back on Enduring Word's ass, they go on to say that the reason God interfered is because he didn't want Sarai's womb to be defiled by cursed line. They didn't actually say cursed line, but that's how I said it. That they didn't want her womb to be defiled. Which feels a little racist. I mean, maybe I made it sound more racist than it was, but she was infertile, like that was like the first thing we found out about Sarai was that she was infertile. So I feel like that's not actually what the problem was. I think it had more to do with, not only spiritual defilement and deception, but also practicality. God can't get Abram and Sarai to create Israel if Sarai is married to Pharaoh now. Like, that's just how reality works. By the way, it's funny how Abram seemed worried about Egyptians stealing his wife, but then he lets them steal her anyways. Like, clearly he was more worried about his life there. Anyways, some people might also ask why Pharaoh was punished with plagues instead of Abram, who was clearly the one in the wrong here. Maybe Abram's embarrassment over the matter was punishment enough for him. But more so, I would say it wasn't really a punishment so much as a warning shot. They didn't die from the disease, as far as I can tell. I'm guessing they were just like painful rashes or like a really bad flu that probably went away after they left. Pharaoh got it, and he still had enough strength to like cuss out Abram. So I don't think it was that bad. It was just very uncomfortable for them, probably. It was just like a warning not to like literally fuck with these future Jewish people. It might have actually been a double warning, in fact, considering Egypt's history with Jewish people and plagues. It told Pharaoh to not sleep with this woman now, specifically, and also told Egypt in general to be wary of her descendants later, or the plagues would return, it's a type of foreshadowing, if you will. Furthermore, I think this is an example of God stepping up to do what Abram refused to, which is, as her husband, to protect her from the lusts of other men. If we're going a little more traditional in this Old Testament book, Abram was more concerned with his own life than Sarai's well-being and her wishes, failing in his husbandly duties. Maybe beyond Pharaoh keeping, the whole Israel thing from happening, maybe Sarai did not want to have to sleep with this, like, rando person that wasn't even her husband, even though he was a Pharaoh, The text doesn't actually say that, no, it does say, the text does actually say that God interfered because of Sarai, implying Sarah like needed or wanted help. So God had to step in and fill in like as her husband, or at least protect her for Sarai's sake, because Abram wasn't going to do that. It's just another example of God filling in the gaps left by people that you thought you could trust. So God wasn't punishing the Egyptians so much as protecting Sarai and forcing the truth to come out, as well as to warn Egyptians about the Jews for future reference. Just like, guys, just don't mess with these guys, you're gonna get sick. Like, just stay away from them. It also acts as an example of how our deceptions can cause other people to suffer more than ourselves. Sometimes suffering is caused by other people's evil, even when you didn't do anything wrong. I think we kind of know this by now. We're all adults. That's just the world we live in. But don't be too disheartened by this, because God often turns needless suffering into good. When Jesus healed the blind, they probably thought they were blind as a punishment as well. But God turned their disability into an example of the glory and mercy of God. So sometimes bad things are secretly good. In general, God will make it up to the innocent and faithful one way or another. You might have to die first, but it's gonna happen. You're gonna. That's the cool thing about being a Christian. Like, even though everything is bad now, eventually, for a fact, eventually, it will be okay. It can still be unfortunate when the faithful get caught in a lie. It probably wasn't a great look when this supposedly divinely chosen person lied to Pharaoh and pimped out his wife, causing their God to plague all who got near said wife. The first of God's people were probably not seen very favorably by the Egyptians for a bit after this. But God was able to show how he keeps his people accountable with his great power. So even though the Egyptians didn't like his followers after this encounter, as what happens many times, there likely was an air of a fearful respect for the God himself. So a mixed yet typical send-off for these guys. Speaking of send-offs, we're done now. So any questions or comments, post them now. Any prayer requests or prayer request updates, also send them in. Currently for prayer requests, let me double check that. Yes, okay. So we got that one friend. So, there have always been two women, but one of the women said that she was doing better, so I don't think I need to pray for her anymore. So the other one that I can't name, I'm pretty sure she still needs prayer. So, she needs help with her heart, and, she was getting out of a depression, so just making sure that she stays out of the depression. I'm going to pray for my dad a little bit, because things are looking better for him, but, he just got a new house. There's a lot going on, so just want to make sure, the upward trajectory continues. And then my mother still needs to find a church and a job. Also needs to keep some depression at bay. And then for myself, so I had a really hard week this week. The past 2 weeks, I think, have been really hard. I was just really depressed. I really didn't want to be alive for a bit, so that was fun. But so when I was thinking about, oh, I'm gonna do this Bible study, I'm gonna have to give you guys some sob story about how I'm just so depressed, I'm just so sad. However, I have good news. That didn't happen. Yesterday, in fact, I feel like God gave me some peace about my life. I feel like I have a better understanding of where I'm supposed to be and how I'm supposed to interact with the people around me. So I'm going to do a thankful prayer, and I'm also going to do a please make it stick prayer, because during this depressive episode, I've kind of gone back and forth a little bit. I feel like this one feels different, so I think it's going to stick, but I'm just going to pray that it sticks just in case. So, I'm going to close this out in this prayer. If I mentioned you, and it doesn't seem like it applies to you anymore, you have any updates, please let me know, because I don't like having to pray for the same thing all the time. And I like it when people tell me, like, hey, I'm better now, and I'm like, hey, it worked. I will take partial credit for your life being better. So, yes, I'm gonna pray now. So, God, clear my throat out. So, God, thank you for bringing us all here together. I'd like to apologize, first of all, because I just now realized that I forgot to do the opening prayer. That was my bad. I keep forgetting to do that. Well, I don't keep forgetting to do it. I think this is like the second time I've forgotten to do it, so not a horrible track record, but help me remember to do the prayer next time. But otherwise, thank you for bringing all the people that wanted to watch this. I just wanted to pray for my mother, who needs to find a church and also a job. It's weirdly more difficult than you would think, but I just pray that you guide her through that kind of stormy weather. Help her to recognize that even when she feels completely alone and at loss, you are there to comfort her, and you are there to take an active role in her life. Like, you're not just some like distant God. Like, you are there, and you are gonna do things if we let you do it. So just help her to keep those sights on you. I'd also like to pray for my dear friend who is going through some health issues and kind of floating through, bobbing up and down, some anxiety and depression. Help her doctors figure out what's going on with her. Help her to also figure out, because it's a team effort with her. So just help answers be given, get those answers out there so she can be a little bit more at ease. Also keep her focused more on you. Don't let her forget that you are in her life, and you can do things. If she just like leans on you, help her to remind her that you are there for her, and you're not just like you're not just like, oh yeah, I'm there, like, you're not just like some kind of feel-good God. Like I said with my mother, you take an active role, if we let you. So help her to let you take an active role in her life. I also like to pray for my dad. Thank you for giving him some what was it? It's not peace. Thank you for doing good things for him. He seems to be on an upward trajectory, so thank you for that. I just want to encourage that upward trajectory. I'd rather it not go down. There's nothing worse than like thinking things are going better and then it just like crashes. So just keep that upward trajectory going. Help him to, even if things do get shaky, remind him you're there for him. All the stuff that's going on around him, it doesn't really matter as much as you matter. So just remind him of that. And then for me and myself, thank you for dragging me out of depression. Honestly, didn't really feel like a dragging. Kind of just snapped, and suddenly I don't know, I maybe cried it out or something. I don't know, but thank you for very suddenly giving me some peace and clarity on the situation. I just pray that it stays that way and I don't have to struggle with it later. Help me to remember that you are the most important thing. Nobody else matters. I don't care about anyone else but you. That's a lie, but help me to make it not a lie. And that is all I can really ask for. So until next time, thank you so much. Love you. And okay, bye. Amen. And that is the Bible study. So Again, if you have any questions or updates or comments, let me know. I like to end with a loud worship song, but I can't play the music here because copyright. So for those watching on YouTube, if you want to just go in the description and click on the link for the loud worship, it should just be right at the top. Click on that. It's fun videos. It's I believe it's the old TobyMac, singing us a bop as he always does, and it's just a fun way to end the evening. So I encourage you to listen to it, bop, dance along to it. Let the music get that heart rate up in a good way, and that is all. So see you next week. Goodbye.